In recent years, gluten has become so much more known about and widely adapted as a way of eating, or gluten-free as a way of eating, or at least an ingredient that is avoided or limited. But so many people still don't know and understand what it is, what it does, why so many people would want to avoid it, and why I don't include it in my ThermoFit program or recipes, but instead teach people how to make gluten-free alternatives. So the purpose of this video is just to give you quite a basic understanding of gluten and those things I just mentioned, so that you can make a better informed and educated decision for yourself moving forward around gluten. So what is gluten? Gluten is a protein that is found in some grains, so wheat, barley, and rye, and contaminated oats. Now, it feels weird saying protein because normally protein is associated as a positive. However, in this case, it is most certainly not a positive, and it's not something that you would be missing out on protein if you were to remove from your diet. It's responsible for the stretchiness and the elasticity that you find in doughs and wheat flours. And any product that has those grains I mentioned, the wheat, the barley, the rye, and sometimes or most of the time oats, will contain gluten. So think things like bread, pasta, cakes, muffins, biscuits, doughs, and anything else that you can think of that has wheat flour. Also, it's used in a lot of packaged and processed foods that wouldn't normally have that, but it's used as a binding agent and a filling agent. Now, what it does. So I mentioned it's for the stretchiness and the elasticity, but what it does in the body is the most important thing I want you to understand from this. When gluten is consumed, it actually causes an inflammatory response, meaning it irritates the gut lining, especially the small intestine, damaging the gut lining and leading to symptoms like bloating, gassiness, diarrhea, fatigue, brain fog, and in the more extreme cases, skin rashes, micronutrient deficiencies, leaky gut, and even osteoporosis, infertility, and depression. It's all been linked to those things. And there are different levels of gluten sensitivity, ranging from celiac disease, which is at the highest level an allergic reaction to gluten, going to intolerance and sensitivity. Studies have shown, and I honestly believe, that every single person has some form of gluten intolerance somewhere on that scale, even if they don't know it. And there's people out there, you might be one of them, that say, I don't have any sensitivity to gluten whatsoever, and I believe that people who do believe that fall into one of a few categories. One, their reaction's quite mild, so they don't actually notice it too much, or they can mistake it for being a reaction to something else, for example, sugar, because often gluten and sugar are consumed together in the same product. Two, some people aren't very in tune with their body and the relationship between what they eat and how they feel. Is this serious, Pablo? Put that food there all day, and now you decide to crunch on it right next to me. 3, they've never not eaten it for long enough to identify how they feel without it. Or 4, they're in denial and they don't want to even consider that gluten may be causing any kind of trouble because it's in all of the foods that they know, regularly eat, and love. And thinking back to me 10 years ago, I was all 4 of those things. Some form of gluten-containing foods may not have as high of a reaction than others, and this is mainly when the grains have been processed like they used to be traditionally processed, which is soaked and or fermented. So think of something like sourdough. A lot of people who have a gluten sensitivity won't get the same kind of symptoms that they would eating something like a sourdough than they would eating a regular type of bread. And on that note, I think that it's today, when there's so many more people that are sensitive to gluten, know about it, it comes down to a few things. One, we're more educated and informed about what it is, so people can make the connection with their symptoms and where it's coming from. Two, it's in so many more foods these days because we have a lot more and consume a lot more packaged and processed food. And as I mentioned before, it's in the form of a filler and a binding agent. And the third is that we simply don't ferment and soak the grains like they used to traditionally. So it has a higher effect. All of that being said, I think that that kind of also covers why people would want to avoid it and why I also don't include it in my ThermoFit recipes or program, because health and long-term sustainable health is my top priority for my challenges and for what I do through my business. I want to make it clear that I'm not advocating that everybody cut gluten out 100% of the time, because that is not sustainable. And in order to have anything last, we need it to be achievable and sustainable and feel like we're not restricting and on a diet. So if you're not familiar with the ThermoFit principle and the philosophy, I'm very strong on the 80-20 rule, so eating whatever you want 20% of the time. But what I commonly find through my ThermoFit challenges and my experience in the personal training, health and weight loss industry is that once people do cut out gluten for a certain amount of time, say 30 days, they will tend to not want to add it back in, or at least not as often, because they know how good they feel without it. So following that 80-20 rule, and eating gluten if you want 20% of the time, I can guarantee that even if you don't feel like you have a sensitivity to gluten, not eating it 80% of the time, you will feel a lot better than if you were eating it 100% of the time or in most of your meals. I still eat gluten sometimes myself. I love sourdough, so it's like the better end of the scale, but I also love a good croissant and muffins and brownies and whatever I feel like at the time. So it's not about cutting it out completely. It's about limiting it to the amount of times that you do include it. It wasn't until I did a 30-day challenge myself back in 2014, I think it was, or 2013 even. It was a 30-day paleo challenge. And so I cut out gluten. I also cut out refined sugars and additives and things. So the results were partly from gluten, but partly from other processed foods. It wasn't until I did that 30 days myself that I realized how much gluten affected me. It affected me in the form of bloatedness, sluggishness, like tired, and even puffy around the eyes sometimes. So that actually that 30 days set me on a course of where I am today, as all things in life lead us to where we are, all experiences that we've had lead us to where we are. But it was that 30 days that was actually the biggest transformation into helping switch my clients in the PT studio to a gluten-free way, and also getting a Thermomix because it was so easy to adapt and change and swap things to a gluten-free way of eating. This is how it came about for ThermoFit to be completely gluten-free, because I created so many recipes that were gluten-free alternatives to recipes that usually are filled with gluten. So breads, cakes, muffins, muesli, muesli bars, crumbs, snack crackers, anything that has gluten, I am adapting it and making it an easy way and in a gluten-free way that still tastes good. Obviously, with the help of the Thermomix, that made that process ridiculously easy to do. So I encourage anybody to just give it a go as an experiment on yourself. Minimum 30 days. There is not one single benefit to gluten. There is absolutely no reason why we would want to keep it in our diet apart from convenience and having it be a habitual routine in all of the foods that we eat on a day-to-day basis. But on a nutritional level, there is not one single benefit to gluten that I know of. So what have we got to lose by trying it? If it's something you do, please let me know how you go and how you feel afterwards. I know that with all my ThermoFit challenges, they just always tell me how much better they feel without it. So hopefully that will be you too.